Reading books and dealing massive damage numbers is something that Xingqiu has become very good at, and the only question you need to ask yourself, how will you build them? One of the first things that are especially important to understand about Xingqiu would be the way his Hydro Blades work. And while the basic premise of their functionality is clear, there are a few small things that can improve your gameplay experience once you master them. So you probably already know that anytime you get attacked while the blades are out, one of them will shatter and the damage will be reduced by a certain percentage. But the way the talent describes the effect of damage reduction makes it sound one blade reduces one single source of damage, but in reality, once a sword shatters and for roughly a second, all damage will be reduced. So as you can imagine, this means as long as you have the swords rotating around you, you will have a significantly better survivability, so if you have a cluster of rockets that are coming for you, the experience will surely be less painful. And what's also interesting is that when you use your elemental skill, for roughly half a second or less, you will apply Hydro status on yourself, which means you can either safely cleanse yourself from pyro debuff, but at the same time, you can also get frozen if there's a cryo status on you. And besides the defensive peculiarities of the elemental skill, it still hits like a truck, and you definitely want to use it as soon as possible, while treating the whole sword defense tactic as a nice side bonus instead. And when it comes to his elemental burst, it sure is something that will improve your damage output significantly, and if you want to maximize the consistency, make sure to keep attacking your targets once per second, since this is the internal cooldown that is placed on the water swords that get unleashed. And depending on your constellation level, you can unleash these swords from 15 to 18 times, however, usage in the actual battlefield is different, since you still need to move and dodge, so unless all of your targets are stunned, expect to deliver roughly 10 rounds of these swords. Also, keep in mind bow and catalyst characters can only unleash these swords with their normal attacks, so someone like Ningguang or Ganyu who utilize charge attacks won't work so well together. In short, the amount of defense and damage you can squeeze out of Xingqiu's burst and elemental skill is astonishing, so you only need to keep in mind a couple of small details in order to fully utilize his massive potential of being a damage support character. But before you can go off generating big numbers, we'll need to take a look at his equipment. Your biggest priority once you start building Xingqiu would be to improve his energy recharge, since the elemental burst has one of the biggest energy costs, and even though his elemental skill can generate from 4 to 5 hydro particles, having excellent energy recharge will help you activate his burst more constantly. So this means when we're looking at weapons, you definitely want to get one of the swords that provide energy recharge from their substat, and probably the best one of the lot would be the sacrificial sword, since not only will it give you much needed energy recharge, but its passive is actually insanely good due to how long of a cooldown his elemental skill has. So if you can trigger his skill twice, you will generate tons of particles, which lets you almost immediately launch your burst. Also, if you want to get more useful tips like weapon optimization, make sure to follow us on Twitter, link in the description. Moving over to artifacts, you definitely want to get at least a 2-set bonus from the Noblesse Oblige, and then mix and match with the other potential artifact sets, like the new Hydro set from Dragonspine, or either of the 2-set bonuses from Exiles or Scholars. But if you're lucky enough with artifact stats, then you could definitely go for a 4-set bonus of Noblesse Oblige, since after activating his burst, you can easily switch to other characters and utilize the nice boost of the 4-set bonus provides, in addition to all of the normal attacks you will be unleashing. And the main goal you're trying to accomplish with your weapon and artifacts would be to increase your energy recharge to somewhere around 200%, give or take, but the number can be lower depending on your situation and team composition. And you should be able to reach this by simply using a weapon and a Sans 5-star artifact that each provide energy recharge from their mainline stats, and for the rest of them, because Xingqiu's talent scales so well with these stats, you definitely want to get a critical rating or damage circlet, and obviously, you will also want a goblet with hydro damage bonus. And as always, make sure to aim for that 2-to-1 critical damage and rating ratio, so you can have consistent damage. Finally, for his talent priority, you definitely want to first increase his burst as much as possible before moving on to his elemental skill. This becomes especially important if you have unlocked his last constellation, which provides an even bigger damage boost to his burst, so if you want to see those big damage numbers fly, make sure to first at least get to level 9 of his burst talent. In essence, you want to build Xingqiu almost like a dedicated damage dealer, except you can skip on leveling his normal attack talent, and you don't need to work too hard on his artifacts, since he truly shines as a damage support character that also provides excellent defense for your team. So keep in mind his energy recharge, get appropriate weapon and artifacts, and then unleash magnificent damage upon your enemies. Building a team with Xingqiu is very easy since his Hydro element works so well with so many characters, and one good way to use him would be to include him into a lineup that have melee damage dealers so that you can fully utilize his swords for defense and damage capabilities. This of course doesn't mean that ranged characters that use bows or catalysts won't be a good match for him, but the few small things could have an impact in your team building, like the previously mentioned fact that his swords from his burst won't trigger when using charged attacks with bow or catalyst user. On the other hand, some characters like Fish official will love him, especially if you decide to use her as your main damage dealer that makes use of her normal attacks, so you can expect to trigger lots of electro charge reactions paired with devastating hydro swords. Now because the endgame currently heavily favors Melt and Vaporize as strongest reactions for dealing damage, using him with someone like Xiangling, Diluc, Bennett or Klee can definitely produce a lot of big numbers without too much effort. He also works flawlessly together with some cryo characters like Kaya or Chongyun when it comes to capitalizing on freeze, and he will have a lot of fun keeping enemies in place and effectively using up his swords from the burst nearly every second. Finally, if you put him in an electro team, make sure to remember that electro charge reactions only scale based on the character who triggers level and their elemental mastery, as well as the enemy's resistance to electro. This can actually work out really well for you if you're somewhere between early and mid game, since it's easier to build transformative teams which deal reactions like electro charge and overload thanks to the way the damage scales. So if you're someone who wants to have good defense and prefer to take your fights in close quarters, adding Xingqiu to your team will provide a lot of utility and damage, as well as significantly improve your team's survivability. Just remember to keep switching back to him and reapplying his elemental skill before his burst becomes available, since this provides one of the biggest energy sources for him and it lets you activate an already expensive burst more often. There's definitely a lot of powerful damage you can get from this book-loving enthusiast, and right from the start he can be a very helpful teammate that currently belongs to an element where he and Barbara are the only 4-star Hydro characters, so there's not a lot to choose from if you haven't obtained Mona or Child. But one thing that hasn't been discussed yet in detail are his constellations, and the good thing about him is that he doesn't really need anything to be a capable party member, and obtaining more constellations of him will only make him stronger, so even something like his first constellation already gives your team better survivability, while something like his fourth constellation gives a decent damage boost to his elemental skill. So this means if you truly enjoy using him, obtaining more constellations of him will give very noticeable improvements. Overall, Xingqiu provides very competent damage support capabilities that can be used without too much effort, and the way his skill and burst interact and provide defense and offense is truly something you can appreciate. And that's the thing about him, he's not just someone who will be here for damage support, but indirectly will also keep your team alive thanks to his hovering swords, and there's a lot of leeway at using them. However, if there's one thing that slightly brings him down, then it would be the cost of his burst, and not having equipment with energy recharge will definitely make those bursts happen less often. Also, if you use him with characters that have slow attacks, then you will have a lower damage output because of how much speed is favored by his burst. Still, he's definitely one of the best support damage dealers in the game, making use of him without too much investment, capitalizing on his very strong burst attack, and providing reaction with Pyro is definitely something that's not easy to come by, not to mention a guardian angel that indirectly can keep your team alive. Now, if only we could ever learn what he keeps reading from that book of his. Enjoyed the video? Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification on, as well as gently press the like button. Also, check out more of our videos recommended for you and follow us on Twitter for up-to-date news. Thank you for watching us.